Hello, dear friends. Welcome to our Storytime Hour. Today, we are going to read a story by a Danish writer, a famous fairy tale writer, Hans Christian Andersen. He was born in a small town of Odense in a poor family, and when he was 16, went to Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark, to make his fortunes. As a young man, Andersen had a beautiful singing voice, and for some time he worked at the opera, actually singing behind stage for opera singers. But as it often happens with young men, his voice disappeared with age, and he had to find other ways to earn his living. And so he began writing. He had always been writing, but not officially. He never sought to actually publish. As fortunes would have it, he did become a famous writer, and his plays were performed in the very same theater from which he was fired when his voice disappeared when he was a young man. Sadly, he was also a very lonely man. He had no family of his own, no wife and children, even though he obviously liked children because he wrote so many wonderful stories for them. He wrote pieces for grown-ups as well, stories and novels. But of course, for the most part, he is known for the fairy tale. So today we are going to read his tale called The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep, written in 1845. Have you ever seen a very old chest, black with age and covered with outlandish carved ornaments and curling leaves? Well, in a certain parlor there was just such a chest, handed down from some great-grandmother. Carved all up and down, it ran tulips and roses, odd-looking flourishes, and from fanciful thickets little stags stuck out their little antlered heads. Right in the middle of the chest, a whole man was carved. He made you laugh to look at him grinning away, though one couldn't call his grinning laughing. He had hind legs like a goat's, a little horn in his forehead, and a long beard. All the children called him General Headquarters, Hindquarters, Gives Orders, Front and Rear Sergeant Billy Goat Legs. It was a very difficult name to pronounce, and not many people get to be called by it. But he must have been very important, or why should anyone have taken trouble to carve him at all? However, there he stood, forever eyeing a delightful little china shepherdess on the tabletop under a mirror. The little shepherdess wore golden shoes and looked up her gown fetchingly with a red rose. Her hat was gold, and even her staff was gold. She was simply charming. Next to her stood a little chimney sweep, as black as coal, but made of porcelain too. He was as clean and tidy as anyone can be, because you see he was only an ornamental chimney sweep. If the china makers had wanted to, they could just as easily have turned him into a prince, for he had a jaunty way of holding his ladder, and his cheeks were as pink as a girl's. That was a mistake, don't you think? He should have been dabbed with a pinch or two of soot. He and the shepherdess stood quite close together. They had both been put on the table where they stood, and having been placed there, they had become engaged, because they suited each other so well. Both were young, both were made of the same porcelain, and neither could stand a shock. Near them stood another figure, 3 times as big as they were. Hello, Isaac. Are you going to join us for story time again? Please don't move the tripod. It was an old Chinaman who could nod his head. He too was made of porcelain, and he said he was the little shepherdess's grandfather, but he couldn't prove it. Nevertheless, he claimed that this gave him authority over her, and when General Headquarters, Hindquarters, Gives Orders, Front and Rear, Sergeant Billy Goat Legs asked for her hand in marriage, the old Chinaman had nodded consent. "There's a husband for you," the old Chinaman told the shepherdess, "a husband who, I'm inclined to believe, is made of mahogany. He can make you Mrs. General Headquarters, Hindquarters, Gives Orders, Front and Rear, Sergeant Billy Goat Legs. He has the whole chest full of silver, and who knows what else he's got hidden away in his secret drawers." "But I don't want to go and live in the dark chest," said the little shepherdess. "I have heard people say he's got 11 China wives in there." "Then will make 12, said the Chinaman. "Tonight, as soon as the old chest commences to creak, I'll marry you off to him, as sure as I'm a Chinaman." Then he nodded off to sleep. The little shepherdess cried and looked at her true love, the porcelain chimney sweep. "Please, let's run away into the big, wide world," she begged him, "for we cannot stay here." "I'll do just what you want me to do," the little chimney sweep told her. "Let's run away right now. I feel sure I can support you by my chimney sweeping." "I wish we were safely down off the table," she said. "I'll never be happy until we're out in the big, wide world." He told her not to worry and showed her how to drop her little feet over the table's edge and how to step from one gilded leaf to another down the carved leg of the table. He set up his ladder to help her, and down they came safely to the floor. But when they glanced at the old chest, they saw a great commotion. All the carved stags were craning their necks, tossing their antlers, and turning their heads. General Headquarters, Hindquarters, Gives Orders, Front and Rear, Sergeant Billy Goat Legs jumped high in the air and shouted to the old Chinaman, "They're running away! They're running away!" This frightened them so much, they jumped quickly into the drawer of the window seat. Here they found 3 or 4 decks of cards, not quite complete, and a little puppet theater which was set up as nicely as could be. A play was in progress, and all of the queens of diamonds, hearts, clubs, and spades sat in the front row and fanned themselves with the tulips they held in their hands. Behind them, the knaves lined up, showing that they had heads both at the top and the bottom, as face cards do have. The play was about 2 people who were not allowed to marry, and it made the shepherdess cry because it was so like her own story. "I can't bear to see any more," she said. "I must get out of this drawer at once." But when they got back to the floor and looked up at the table, they saw the old Chinaman was wide awake now. Not only did his head, but his whole body was rocking back and forth. The lower part of his body was one solid piece, you see. "The old Chinaman's coming!" cried the little shepherdess, who was so upset that she fell down on her porcelain little knees. "I have an idea," said the chimney sweep. "We'll hide in the potpourri vase in the corner. There we can rest upon the rose petals and lavender, and if he finds us, we can throw salt into his eyes." "It's no use," she said. "Besides, I know the potpourri vase was once the old Chinaman's sweetheart. And where there used to be love, a little affection is sure to remain. No, there is nothing for us to do but to run away into the big, wide world." "Are you really so brave that you'd go into the wide world with me?" asked the chimney sweep. "Have you thought about how big it is, and that we can never come back here?" "I have," she said. The chimney sweep looked her straight in the eyes and said, "My way lies up through the chimney. Are you really so brave that you'll come with me into the stove and crawl through the stovepipe? It will take us to the chimney. Once we get there, I'll know what to do. We shall climb so high that they'll never catch us, and at the very top there's an opening into the big, wide world." He led her to the stove door. "It looks very black in there," she said. but she let him lead her through the stove and through the stovepipe where it was pitch black night. "Now we've come to the chimney," he said, "and see how the bright star shines over our heads." A real star, high up in the heavens, shone down as if it wished to show them the way. They clambered and scuffled, for it was hard climbing and terribly steep, way, way up high. But he lifted her up, held her safe, and found the best places for her little porcelain feet. At last, they reached the top of the chimney, where they sat down, for they were so tired, and no wonder. Overhead was the starry sky, and spread before them were all the rooftops in town. They looked out into the big, wide world. The poor shepherdess had never thought it would be like that. She flung her little head against the chimney sweep and sobbed so many tears that the gilt washed off her sash. "This is too much," she said. "I can't bear it. The wide world is too big. Oh, if only I were back on my table under the mirror. I'll never be happy until I stand there again, just as before. I followed you faithfully out into the world, and if you love me the least little bit, you will take me right home." The chimney sweep tried to persuade her that it wasn't sensible to go back. He talked to her about the old Chinaman and of the general headquarters, kind quarters, gives orders, front and rear, sergeant, billy goat legs. But she sobbed so hard and kissed her chimney sweep so many times that he had to do as she said, though he thought it was the wrong thing to do. So back down the chimney they climbed with great difficulties, and they crawled through the wretched stovepipe into the dark stove. Here they listened behind the door to find out what was happening in the room. Everything seemed quiet, so they opened the door, and oh, the horror! There on the floor lay the Chinaman in 3 separate pieces. When he had come running after them, he tumbled off the table and smashed. His whole back had come off in one piece, and his head had rolled into the corner. General headquarters, hindquarters, gives orders, front and rear, sergeant billy goat legs was standing where he always stood, looking pensive. "Oh dear," said the little shepherdess, "poor old grandfather is all broken up, and it's entirely our fault. I shall never live through it." She wrung her delicate hands. "He can be patched," said the chimney sweep. "He can be riveted. Don't be so upset about him. A little glue for his back and a strong rivet in his neck, and he will be just as good as new, and just as disagreeable as he ever was." "Will he really?" she asked as they climbed back to their old place on the table. "Here we are," said the chimney sweep, "back where we started from. Isaac, please stop moving the tripod. We could have saved ourselves a lot of trouble." "Now, if only the old grandfather were mended," said the little shepherdess. "Is mending terribly expensive?" He was mended well enough. The family had his back glued together and a strong rivet put through his neck. That made him as good as new, except he never again could he nod his head. "It seems to me that you have grown haughty since your fall, though I don't see why you should be so proud of it," General Headquarters, Hindquarters, Gives Orders, Front and Rear, Sergeant Billy Goat Legs complained. "Am I to have her as my wife, or am I not?" The chimney sweep and the little shepherdess looked so pleadingly at the old Chinaman, for they were deathly afraid he would nod. But he didn't. He couldn't. And neither did he care to tell anyone that, forever and a day, he'd have to wear a rivet in his neck. So the little porcelain couple remained together. They thanked goodness for the rivet in grandfather's neck, and they kept on loving each other until the day they broke. The end. So that is our tale of the shepherdess and the chimney sweep. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next time.